If there's one iconic dish in Italy besides pizza, I'd have to say it's lasagna. The thing is though, there are different kinds all over Italy. The one I want to make for you today is my favorite. It's lasagna alla Bolognese. It's rich, it's creamy, it's silky smooth and decadent. And today we're going to make it from scratch. Welcome to Actually Italian. I'm Sal, and if you're looking for real deal Italian food, the way they make it in Italy, I think you're gonna love this channel. Most Italians agree that the best version of lasagna comes from Bologna. The word lasagna in Italian literally refers to the pasta, not the whole dish. So it's that one sheet of pasta is a lasagna. There isn't one way to make lasagna all over Italy. This version from Bologna is a lot different than what you'd get in Naples or in Sicily or anywhere else. What makes the Bolognese version so good and so unique is that in a way it's very simple because it only takes 4 elements to put this together. The most important one is the ragu. The ragu alla Bolognese is rich, it's meaty, it's creamy. The second element is the fresh pasta. It's an egg-based pasta that they do really well in Bologna and gives a silky and soft texture to the lasagna. Then we've got creamy bechamel, and it's finished off with the king of cheeses, parmesan. Now I want to make the fresh pasta sheets, so let's start there. I've got my flour in a bowl ready to go. At this point I'm going to make a little well in the middle and add my eggs. I'll start beating the eggs in the middle and just draw in a little bit of that flour at a time. I'm only using soft wheat flour. I don't want to put any semolina in this that would give this a little bit of a chew. For lasagna, we want this to be soft and not have any kind of chew at all. Once I see it starts getting incorporated more and more, I kind of enlarge my radius there to bring in more and more flour. Then I get to a point where I can't really mix it with the fork anymore, so I'm going to tilt this all off to my workbench and start kneading it just to get the flour incorporated. So I just want to work the dough around and just kind of bring that flour in and just keep processing and keep working at it. It'll start getting smoother, it'll start getting less sticky, and we're not actually going through the whole kneading process for this. Right now I'm just trying to get all that flour absorbed and into the pasta. I've got all the flour basically absorbed, so this is done. You might find that it's not really absorbing anymore because it does depend on the size of your eggs and how much flour used, other factors too. So as long as it's not sticky, you can just get rid of the rest of that flour. We're going to wrap this up and we want this to sit for at least a half an hour. You could get away with putting it in the fridge for a couple of hours if you need to do other things in the meantime, just a couple hours at the most. What you can do ahead of time is the ragu, especially since it takes 2 to 3 hours to make a good ragu. I'm not going to go through the step-by-step recipe in this video today. I already have a video dedicated to the authentic official ragu alla Bolognese. That's the recipe that I'm going to use today, but I've got a link to that video in the description box below. Now on to the third essential element of a classic lasagna alla Bolognese. It's the bechamel. In a small sauce pot, I want to melt some butter and then add some flour, equal amounts. Once everything's incorporated, I need to let that raw flour flavor cook off a little bit. Just a couple of minutes. We're not trying to get any color on this. I just want to get rid of that flavor. Once I smell that it's getting a little toasty, it kind of smells nutty, then it's ready for the milk. I just want to put a little bit of milk in at a time. It's going to look really thick as I do this, but this is going to prevent lumps. So just add a little bit, give it a stir, get it incorporated, add a little more. I just keep going like that until I have 1.5 liters of milk in there. Once I have all the milk in, I'm going to add a bay leaf and then I'll grate some fresh nutmeg in. I'll give everything a stir and I want to keep stirring this, because if I let it cook, it's going to kind of form a crust on the bottom. So I just gently stir, making sure that I get into the corners too, and I'll do that for about 10 to 15 minutes until it gets a little bit thicker than, say, the consistency of buttermilk. Essentially, I should be able to take a spoon, run my finger over the back of the spoon, and it doesn't drip. It is going to thicken up as it cools too. So I'm going to add some salt to this. and then shut the heat off, set it aside. I'll put some plastic wrap right over the top, literally in contact with the top of the milk, so that way we don't create a film on it. While the bechamel's cooling, we can get back to making the pasta. So put the pasta ball on a floured surface. I'm gonna cut it in half and then start pressing these down to make them just a little bit flatter. And I just want to get them narrow enough so I can start working it through the machine. Once I've got these flattened out a bit, I'm going to set one half aside and put some plastic wrap on it so it doesn't dry out. With the other half, I'm going to go right to the roller. I want to start this on the widest setting between the rollers. And I can't tell you what number that is because everybody's machine is different. So just make sure it's at its widest on yours. I'll run this through the first time. Then I'm going to fold this in half and I'll put it through that same setting again. This is called laminating the pasta, and it's also going to contribute to the texture that we're looking for. Now I'm going to click to the next setting and repeat. I'll run it through one time, I'll fold it in half, and then go through that same setting again. At this point, I don't need to fold it anymore, but I do need to click it over to the next setting, and now for each setting, I'm going to run this through twice. So I'll put it through one time, gather it up again, and run it through a second time. I'll continue this process all through the settings. Once in a while, I'll put a little flour on it just to keep it from sticking. Though it is okay if it does stick a little bit and you get some holes. After all, this is going to be in a casserole and you're not going to see any of these imperfections. At some point, this sheet is going to be pretty long and hard to manage by yourself. So just cut it in half and then keep reworking it. Once we get it down to the setting where it's roughly 1.5 to maybe 2 millimeters in thickness, that's about where we want it. When these boil, they are going to absorb water and get thicker. So I've just measured the length of the pan and I'm going to cut these sheets to that measurement. I've got my pot of water on. It's heavily salted. These are only going to cook for a few seconds, so you want to kind of overdo it with the salt. I'm going to take a sheet and I'm going to slowly dip it into that water. Doing this slowly is going to make sure that it doesn't fold over on itself and end up sticking to the other side. I only want to do 2 of these sheets at a time. Now these are literally only going to take about 30 seconds to cook. And when they float up, that's when you know it's done. This is when I'm going to gently scoop these sheets out and put them in that cold water. That stops the cooking process so they don't start breaking apart. After a minute, I just take it out and put it on a towel, and I'm going to lay these out on one layer. As I go through though, I will need to put another towel on top of this and then put the pasta on that layer. Once all the pasta's boiled, I have all of my elements ready to go. I've grated the parmesan, I've got the ragu ready, I've got the bechamel ready, so now it's time to assemble. I'll take my pan and start with some ragu. You don't need to use a lot here, I just want to get the bottom kind of covered with that and some of the bechamel. This is going to make sure that the pasta doesn't burn to the bottom. Now I'll layer my pasta in, and you can see how perfectly these sheets fit in there. Now you might be wondering if you can use the no boil pasta for this. That dry pasta is going to absorb a lot of that sauce. So to still have it be rich and creamy and oozy, you definitely want to overdo it with the sauce and the bechamel. You want to make sure that the ragu is wetter than you see it in this video right now. The same thing goes with the bechamel. You don't want it to be quite so thick. You want it to be a little bit looser and also have a lot more ragu and a lot more bechamel. Once we have that first layer of pasta in there, we want to repeat that process. So we go in with some ragu, and I'll spread it around. Then I'll add some of that bechamel. We want a good coating all over. Now I'll take some of that grated parmesan and give it a good sprinkle. Then I go again with another layer of pasta. And again the ragu, again with the bechamel, and again with the grated cheese. And I'll just continue that until I get to that last layer. I want to make sure that pasta on top is nicely covered though with a lot of ragu and bechamel and the cheese. Now you can see those corners and those edges have a lot of that pasta kind of sticking out. We need to tuck those down into the sides. Now this beauty is ready for the oven. Or if you're not ready to bake it, you can set this aside for a while. While I wouldn't do this a day ahead, you could easily let this sit for a few hours in the fridge before you bake it. Now since I'm going right from assembly into the oven, It's going to take me about 40 minutes until this is done. If you're taking this out of the fridge and it's still cold, then this is going to take a little bit longer, so just keep that in mind. Now it's been 40 minutes and I know it's done just by looking at that beautiful crust. The top is nice and caramelized on the edges. We've got some of those creamy bits. Now I know you want to dig right into this, as I do too, but it's really important to wait 30 minutes before you cut into it. That's going to give it the time that it needs to set so you get those nice uniform layers.